Hey, I'm Tyler. In this video, we're going to go over answers and explanations for my T7 science practice test. So just to bring up to speed, I have a TEAS science practice test. You can download it from my website right here. You can give it a try, see what you get right, see what you get wrong, and then you can also figure out your score. So then in this video, we're going to walk through the answers step by step. You'll get a little mini lesson for each question, so you'll learn everything that you need to know. And that means that when you see similar questions on the actual TEAS, you'll know how to solve them, right? Now, I want you to get the first 10 of these mini lessons totally free, so you can see how I teach, so you can see if my style helps you learn, and then if you like it, if you like learning from me, you can get the rest of the explanations and mini lessons for the whole test from my website right here, teasinOneday.com. Now, how should you use this video? Okay, people ask me that all the time. Well, it's up to you, okay? Some people just want to start watching through the video right away, looking at the questions, seeing how I explain them. That's totally fine. They don't even want to worry about doing the test first, okay? But other people want to try the test first, calculate their score, then come back and watch the videos for the questions that they're not quite sure about, right? So it's up to you. You know, either one of these approaches is fine. But just to let you know real quick, let's say you want to try the test first, okay? As I say, you can download it right here. You print it out, do the questions, and then at the end, there are a bunch of scoring sheets, so you can figure out what your score would be on the overall test, and then you can figure out what your score would be for the various subjects, right? So you can figure out what would your A&P score be, right? What would your life science score be? What would your, you get the idea here, right? So you can do that, and then you can come back and watch the mini lessons for the questions that gave you trouble. Again, either approach is fine. Now, I don't want to waste too much time here. So just real quick, here's what we're going to be talking about as we go through the questions. Obviously, we're going to be talking about all the steps that you need to answer each question, okay? We'll also talk about the topic of each question so that you can learn your strengths and weaknesses and what areas you might need to study a little bit more. We're also going to cover two other super important things, okay? First, I'm going to tell you how important the various topics are, okay? Some questions on the TEAS are on what I call high priority, essential topics, okay? I think these high priority essential topics are some of the easiest to learn. They're the topics that almost always show up in the test, and I think that you should learn as many of these high priority topics as possible. They should be the absolute first thing that you focus on, right? Learn as many high priority topics as you can. Now, some other questions on the test, we'll see that, we'll talk about this, are going to be on what I call challenge topics, okay? These challenge topics are usually harder. They show up less often, they're kind of more random, they're harder to predict, and they're harder to learn. And if you want a really high score, you know, you just want to knock it out of the park, you're going to need to work on some of these challenge topics, okay? But if you just want to pass, if you just want a passing score, usually these high priority essential topics are all you need. So that's why I'm making it super clear whether each question is about one of these high priority topics or whether it's on a challenge topic, so you know what you need to focus on. And lastly, this confuses people all the time, okay? We're going to talk about whether a question is scored or not. Now, what does that mean? Okay? This is something that's super confusing, okay? On the TEAS, on every test, there are 6 questions that don't count. They don't count. Whether you get them right or whether you get them wrong, it doesn't matter. They don't affect your score because they don't get counted. So I wanted this practice test to feel as accurate as possible. So I wanted to show you how the unscored questions work. So just like on a regular TEAS test, some of the questions that are on the test, some of the questions we'll be going over in this video are unscored. Just so you can see how it feels usually to get totally stressed out over a question, say, oh my goodness, you know, it's going to drag down my score. I could never answer this. And then I'll tell you how sometimes, every once in a while, I'll say, oh, well, you know, don't worry about it. This is an unscored question. And that's an important skill to get used to on the TEAS. You see a question totally freaks you out. Well, there's a chance it's unscored. Maybe it doesn't count at all. So just let it go. That's why I wanted to include these unscored questions on my test so you see how it actually feels. Okay, all right, that's it. Okay, let's go. As you probably know, I love walking through this material, so super excited to get started. As I said, you can download the test right here at teasintoneday.com/practice test. And you might want to do that just anyway so you can follow along. Even if you're not going to print it out and do the whole thing right now, it might be nice to, to have it as we go through the video so you can, take notes on it and look at the diagrams and stuff like that. I don't know. You might want to do this. Anyway, as I always say, I love helping people study for the TEAS. I just love it. I love explaining this stuff. I love making it clear. So if you have any questions that I can help with, I'm not kidding around, send me an email. Tyler@teasintoneday.com. I love to help. I love to hear from you. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, number 1. Which organ stores and concentrates bile to aid in the digestion of fats? Is it pancreas, liver, spleen, or gallbladder? Okay, so this question is about anatomy and physiology, and it's a high priority essential topic. Here's what's so high priority about it, okay? All of these are organs. They all have different jobs. And one of the most important high priority things you can do for the A&P section is learning the jobs, the roles of the major organs in the body. Okay, so let's go through these one by one. Number 1, pancreas. What does pancreas do? Okay, this is the kind of stuff you want to have memorized. Okay, pancreas. It makes digestive enzymes and it regulates blood sugar. It regulates blood sugar by secreting the hormones insulin and glucagon. Okay, super important. Now, is this concentrating bile to aid in the digestion of fats? No, we can probably safely skip this one. So, next, liver. Liver has so many jobs. But the main ones are these. Okay? It filters toxins, breaks down waste. It produces bile and various blood proteins. So stuff like albumin, fibrinogen, proteins that are floating around the blood. And then it stores glucose and it processes nutrients. Okay, now, I'm going to tell you right now, here's a big mistake that many people are going to make. They know, or they've learned, right, that the liver produces bile, and they're going to choose B. But here's the thing. This question is saying who stores and concentrates bile. It's not saying who produces it. So before we, go ahead and choose B for liver, let's keep going down this list of the different jobs of the organs. See, what does a spleen do? Spleen, well, does a couple things. It filters blood, removing damaged cells, okay? It produces and stores white blood cells, and it's kind of like this reservoir for blood, okay? It stores blood, particularly red blood cells and platelets, not really having to do, with anything regarding, storing and concentrating bile. It does store blood, but it doesn't, store bile. So let's not choose C. And finally, the gallbladder. What does a gallbladder do? There it is. Stores, concentrates, and releases bile. When you eat something with a lot of fat and oil, the gallbladder contracts to squeeze the bile out, to get it into the intestines. And the bile is an emulsifier. It breaks down the fat so the fat can be more easily absorbed into the body. So anyway, which organ stores and concentrates bile to aid in the digestion of fats? It is D, gallbladder. And don't make that mistake thinking that it's B. No, the liver makes bile, but it doesn't store and concentrate it. So many people get this wrong. The liver makes bile. It doesn't store it. The gallbladder stores, concentrates, and releases bile. D. Okay, next question. During which of the following state changes do particles become more disordered? Is it A, deposition, B, freezing, C, condensation, or D, sublimation? Okay, what topic is this? This is chemistry. And this is a super high priority essential topic. So if you're totally confused by this, well, it just means you have a little brushing up to do on chemistry, particularly on those high priority essential topics. So let's break this down, okay? We're talking about the particles, we're talking about state changes, and we're talking about disorder. So first, let's focus on particles. If you could zoom in on anything, you'd see that it's made of tiny little particles. Now, the particles are arranged differently in stuff depending on whether it is solid, liquid, or gas. Okay? We have three views here. And if you looked at the particles in a solid, they would look like this, all neatly lined up. If you looked at the particles in liquid, they'd be kind of close together, but they'd be much more disorganized. They're kind of swimming around. They're also moving a little bit like this. And finally, the particles in gas would look like this. The particles in gas are spread all over the place. In a diagram like this, we can't show movement very well, but the particles in a gas are flying around millions of miles an hour. I think it's millions, something like that. Millions of miles an hour, banging into stuff all over the place. They're flying around, okay? So, which of the following state changes do particles become more disordered? Now, we want to look at state changes. State change is when a material changes from one state to another. Okay, so let's look at these four state changes. Got to know these for the T's. You also got to know how, the particles look, as we just did, solid, liquid, gas. You also want to know what all these different state changes are. So, okay, deposition, A. What is deposition? Deposition is what happens when gas turns directly to solid. That is deposition. That's a state change that not a lot of people know because we don't see it a lot in daily life. The T's loves it because it's so confusing for people. It's like, what the frick is deposition? Well, they love it. Deposition. Gas turns directly to solid without stopping at liquid in the middle. Now, here's the thing. Deposition, gas to solid. Do the particles become more disordered? No. They become more ordered, right? Because gas is crazy like this. Solid is like nicely packed and all organized. So deposition is a change where they become more ordered. Freezing. What's freezing? Well, most people know what freezing is, okay? Freezing is liquid to solid. Okay, that's freezing. Water freezes, turns into ice. What happens to the disorder of the particles? We have, kind of messy liquid going to very neat organized solid. So the particles become more organized, not more disordered. Okay, so we're going to cross this off. Condensation. What's condensation? Condensation is something a lot of people don't know. Condensation is more common in our daily life, but still a lot of people don't know this. So condensation is what happens when gas turns into a liquid. Condensation. Got to know this. Gotta know this. Condensation. Does disorder of particles increase or does it decrease? They become more ordered, less disordered. We got gas all over the place, liquid, more organized, okay? So again, we can cross out condensation. Finally, D. Well, it's probably going to be the right answer, but it's so important you know this. What is sublimation? What the heck is sublimation? Sublimation is like the opposite of deposition over here. Sublimation is what happens when solid, I'll draw it down here, solid goes directly to gas. Sublimation goes directly to gas without stopping at liquid on the way. This isn't like the solid melts and becomes liquid, then the liquid becomes gas, vaporization. No, this is solid, shoop, directly to gas. What happens to the disorder? Disorder goes up crazy, right? Organized solids, very nice all together. Boom, gas all over the place. Crazy disorder. So that is why the correct answer here is sublimation. Things you got to know for the T's. You got to know all the different state changes, right? What turns into what? You also got to know what this particle level view of different materials look like, depending on whether they are solid, liquid, or gas. Okay. Question 3. Choose the correct ordering of the structures from most simple to most complex. Okay, and I'm not going to, read each one of these. You might want to pause the video if you really want to do it. But basically, we have 4 choices, okay? And it's like myocyte, amino acid, protein, heart. Most simple to most complex. This is a life science question that the TEAS would categorize it as life science. And again, it's a high priority essential topic. You've got to know how to tackle questions like this. Here's what they're getting at. What they're getting at with questions like this is that the human body, or all living things, are made of different stuff that can be organized from simple to complex. So it's like the simplest thing in a person is an atom, right? It's like everything is made of atoms. Atoms super tiny, super simple. You put a bunch of atoms together, you make a molecule, right? We're right over here. Then we have larger versions of molecules with tons of atoms. Those are things like carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, stuff like that. Okay, so then macromolecules are getting bigger. And then at this point, I like to skip a little bit on this levels of organization chart because I think it's a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. But we also know that there are cells in living things, right? All living things are made of cells, okay? And compared to an atom, a cell is much bigger, okay? Cell is much bigger. Cell is made of smaller things called organelles. So it's sort of like atom, molecule, macromolecule, organelle, cell. Put a bunch of cells together, we get a tissue. Put a bunch of tissues together, we get an organ. And put a bunch of organs together, and we get an organ system. Put a bunch of organ systems together, and we get an organism. So we're going from simple to complex. Simple all the way over here, super simple. Around the circle, more and more complex. So this is what the question is asking us to do. It gives us 4 things, and it's sort of saying, where along this path of simple to complex, where do these things fit? Okay? What makes this question a little bit challenging is we also have to know what these things are. Okay? You have to recognize them. So we have these 4 things, and here's what we have, and here's how they fit together. Okay. We start over here with amino acids. Amino acids are little molecules that, when they're put together, form a protein. This is super important to know. Proteins are made of amino acids. And that means that amino acids are simpler than proteins. Proteins are more complex. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, here we have a heart, okay? And then we have this mystery term that might confuse some people, myocyte. What's a myocyte? A myocyte, myo typically refers to things that involve the heart. A myocyte is a fancy way to say heart cell. A myocyte is a heart cell. So heart is made of many myocytes. And then obviously a cell is way bigger than a protein because there are thousands or tens, hundreds of thousands of proteins in one cell. So protein is more simple than a cell, a myocyte. So our correct order from simple to complex is amino acids, protein, myocyte, heart. Which one of these is the correct answer? It's going to be A, amino acid, protein, myocyte, heart. I want to give you a word of warning. This is the kind of question that even if people know the answer, they often get it wrong. Can you guess why? Because they don't read the question carefully. And they just see 1 or 2 words that look right, and then they choose it. Make sure whenever you have a question like this, particularly where you have the same 4 words or 5 words sort of scrambled in different ways, make sure that you read it very, very carefully. Don't pick the wrong answer just because you jump to conclusions And, take the time to read through it and carefully choose, double check, triple check that you're choosing the right answer. People lose so many points on stuff like this because they don't read carefully. Number 4, which of the following deposit minerals forming the matrix of bone? Is it osteons, osteoblasts, osteoclasts, or osteoprogenitors? Okay? This is an anatomy and physiology question. It's another high priority essential topic. All of these words are osteo. We're talking about bones here. If you know basic A&P, you know that osteo refers to bones. But the question is, which of these deposit minerals forming the matrix of bone? Now, what's the matrix of bone? The matrix of bone is like the hard part that bone is made up of. And, here, we have a picture of it right here, the matrix, the hard scaffold of bone. And something you must know about bones is that they're constantly being remodeled. There are certain cells that break down bone, and there are certain cells that then build up bone. And they build up bone by depositing minerals forming that matrix. And we call this the bone remodeling cycle. Some cells break it down, then other cells break it up. And that's one of the things that bones need to stay healthy, to stay strong, is they need sort of this constant remodeling to happen. Okay, now, the 2 cells that you need to know about, most importantly for a question like this, are osteoclasts and osteoblasts. Osteoclasts, their job, these gangsters over here, they break down bone. On the other hand, osteoblasts, these guys here, build up bone. So, I like to remember it here with a C for clast. I like to think about that standing for cut, because they're breaking down bone. Osteoclasts cut, or they break down bone. Osteoblasts, we got a B over here. Blast equals build, because osteoblasts build bones. Clasts cut, blasts build. And that means that our answer here for which of the following deposit minerals forming the matrix of bone is going to be osteoblasts. You absolutely must know what osteoblasts and osteoclasts do when it comes to the bone remodeling cycle. Okay, number 5. It's a little bit different. I'll tell you right now, this is a scientific reasoning question. It's kind of like, okay, this is a different kind of question. 5, a student measures how much oxygen is produced by a plant under different light conditions. The results are shown below. We have this table with numbers and words, stuff like that. Okay. Which conclusion is best supported by the data in the table? And you know what? We're going to stop right there. This is a scientific reasoning question. It's a high priority essential topic. Okay, that's good to know. But I don't want to get too caught up in these answer choices because I want to show you the strategy of how to deal with a question like this. You are going to, bam, stop. I didn't read the answer choices because on a question like this, I don't want you to read the answer choices. As soon as you see a question like this, you are going to stop. Before you look at the answer choices, you have got to figure out what the data, what the information is saying. The answer choices are they are designed to distract you. And the only thing that you need to do when you first encounter a question like this is figure out what the data, what the information is saying, okay? Don't look at the answer choices. Ask yourself, what is this saying? Then, after you know what the information is saying, you're going to get rid of the answer choices you know are wrong, and then you're going to go back and think through the harder ones. Let me show how we do this, okay? Here is what the strategy looks like. Ignore the answer choices. What is the data showing? Okay. A student measures how much oxygen is produced by a plant under different light conditions. Okay. Then we have the results. Okay. So light conditions. What do we have here? We have no light. And then we have a certain amount of oxygen that is produced by the plant when there is no light. 0.5. Okay. Then another situation. The student gives the plant low light. How much oxygen produced? 2.1 milliliters per minute. Medium light, 4.3 milliliters per minute. High light, 4.5 milliliters per minute. Okay? So we have the light is increasing in this direction, more light. And as we have more light, what is happening to the amount or the rate at which oxygen is produced? 0.5, 2.1, 4.3, 4.5. More oxygen. That is what the data is showing. Okay? We give the plant more light, no light, low light, medium light, high light. The amount of oxygen that the plant makes increases. 0.5, 2.1, 4.3, 4.5. If you can't, I don't want to sound negative here, right? But I guess I'm going to be negative. If you can't do like what we just did, if you can't do that, you're cooked for a question like this. Because there's no way that you can actually choose the right answer if you don't know what the data is showing. So that's why I'm like being just like painfully slow at first, looking at how to figure out what the data is showing. Now we know what the data is showing. More light, more oxygen. We can now start looking over the answer choices. The first thing we do is we eliminate answer choices we know are wrong. Like, we don't have to think about it, okay? We don't have to think about it. We just know they are wrong. Okay, A. Increasing light intensity always increases oxygen production at the same rate. You got to think about it, so skip it. It's not immediately, obviously, painfully wrong. Just let it go. We'll come back to it. B. The plant produces the same amount of oxygen in all light conditions. No way. Like, no way, because look, you have no light, it makes 0.5. You have high light, it makes 4.5. Okay? So, the same amount of oxygen in all light conditions? Absolutely not. Because we've said more light, more oxygen. So, like, there's no way that's right. Okay. C. Oxygen production increases with light intensity, but the increase becomes smaller at higher light levels. At high light levels. Got to think about it. You're like, I'm not sure about that. I have to think about that. Okay, good. Skip it. We'll come back. D. The plant only produces oxygen when exposed to high light levels. Absolutely not, right? Because even when it has no light, it makes this much oxygen. Even with no light, it's making a little bit of oxygen. So only produces oxygen when exposed to high light levels. Absolutely not. Okay, so look, we can get rid of B, we can get rid of D. We have 50-50 odds right now. If we just randomly guess between A and C, we'd have 50-50 odds. I'm going to clean this up so we have a little more room. Remember, we eliminated B, we eliminated D. Okay. Now, we know two of them are like totally wrong. Now, let's go back and think through A and C. A. Increasing light intensity always increases oxygen production at the same rate. This is trickier. Let's look at what this means. Okay, this means we go increasing oxygen production at the same rate. Okay, here we go. When we go from no light to low light, we go from 0.5 to 2.1. Now that is a 1.6 change. When we then increase from low light to medium light, we go from 2.1 to 4.3, and that is a 2.2 change. Then we go from medium light to high light, 4.3 to 4.5, and that is a 0.2 change. So A, increasing light intensity always increases oxygen production at the same rate? No, the rate changes. The rate changes. 1.6, 2.2, 0.2. So we know that A is not right. So C is probably going to be right, but let's go through it. Oxygen production increases with light intensity, but the increase becomes smaller at high light levels. Well, look down here, lower light levels, 1.6, 2.2. But then check this out. Yes, at the high light levels, 0.2. We get this tiny little increase. Tiny little increase, so C is correct. Okay? Remember, that is how we do questions like this. Scientific reasoning questions like this is what we do. We have to figure out, we must figure out what the data shows. The most important thing is to do that. Looking through the answer choices Total waste of time. First, you have to figure out what the data is showing. And after that, and only after that, you then go through, you immediately get rid of the ones you just know are wrong, and then the remaining ones, you try and think through them. And if you just can't think through them, like you have no idea what's right, chances are you have eliminated 1, 2, sometimes even 3 questions just by getting rid of the ones that you know are wrong. That's why I'm such a stickler about this technique. Okay, C is the right answer. 6. In mice, somatic cells contain 40 chromosomes. How many chromosomes are found in each germ cell? This is a life science question. It is a high priority, essential topic. Chromosomes, somatic cells, germ cells, gotta know this stuff. Let's break it down. Here's what you need to know. In our bodies, the bodies of most living things, there are many living things. There are 2 types of cells. There are somatic cells and there are germ cells. Somatic cells are like regular body cells. Stuff like skin cells, muscle cells, nerve cells, regular body cells. The germ cells are what we might call sex cells. These are the cells you need for making a baby. Sperm in men, an egg in women. Okay? Germ cells, sex cells. Okay? Germ cells or sex cells are also known as gametes. Okay? So, the most important thing to know about somatic cells and germ cells for this question has to do with their number of chromosomes. And the simple story is that somatic cells have twice as many chromosomes as germ cells. Okay. Somatic cells are called diploid. Germ cells are called haploid. And what this means is diploid. 2x, twice the number of chromosomes. 2x the number of chromosomes as haploids. And sometimes we use a little math to show this. We call diploids, sometimes we call diploid, we call it, where am I going to write it here? 2n. And we call haploid n. So whatever haploid is, diploid is twice that. So if you had some, like, I don't know, some organism that had 10 chromosomes in a germ cell, its somatic cells would have 20 chromosomes. Got it? If you had haploid cells with 20 chromosomes, diploid cells would have 40 chromosomes. Look at that. In mice, somatic cells contain 40 chromosomes. So in mice, we have 40 chromosomes in the somatic cells. How many chromosomes in the diploid? In the haploid? In the germ cells? Half of that. It's going to be 20 chromosomes. And that means that our correct answer is B. So, remember this. Germ cells, sex cells, sperm and egg, haploid. They have half the number of chromosomes as somatic cells. Somatic cells are the regular body cells. Diploid somatic cells, twice the number of chromosomes as haploid germ cells or sex cells. Okay, got to know it. So important. Which of the following atoms has the largest atomic radius? H, K, Cl, or Fr? Okay. This is a chemistry question, and it's a challenge topic. Okay? So in other words, if you see a question like this, and you're not sure how to answer it, even if you've studied chemistry, you don't immediately need to freak out. That's what I'm trying to tell you here. You don't immediately need to freak out because it's a hard question. It's a challenge topic. It's a hard question. you can still get a good score on the TEAS even if you don't know how to answer this challenge topic. Let me show you how to do it so that we can work through it, and you can probably use this information to, you know, there's a possibility it will help you with another question when you take the TEAS. But you aren't necessarily expected to know this. It's a challenge topic. Okay, so let's talk through it. Now here's the periodic table. No. You're not supposed to have memorized it. I'm not saying that. But you should have a general idea of where atoms, elements are on the periodic table. Okay? Now, we're talking about atomic radius here. And what is atomic radius? Atomic radius is essentially size of an atom. So the question is asking which of these atoms has the largest size. Now there are a couple patterns on the periodic table that you might know or that you might be able to even figure out. Okay, so the first is that as we go down like this, atoms get bigger. And believe it or not, as we go across a row like this, atoms get smaller. So like bromine here is smaller than calcium. That's what I mean by atoms get smaller. Now, this is one of those questions that we can usually get rid of some of the answers by process of elimination. Okay, first off, A, hydrogen. Do you know where hydrogen is on the periodic table? Hydrogen is up here. Hydrogen is the smallest of all the atoms, has one proton. So there's no way that hydrogen is going to be the largest of the atom because it is the smallest on the whole periodic table. Now, you may know potassium is down here. Chlorine is here. And you may be thinking kind of like, I'm not sure where these are, okay? But they're kind of far up because the atoms that you are used to, and this is the key, the atoms that you are used to for the TEAS that show up on the TEAS tend to be high up on the periodic table. They tend to be up here. Look at this. All of these atoms that you're used to are pretty high up, okay? Look, we have all these hits, all the greatest hits. Oxygen, sulfur, phosphorus, chlorine, potassium, calcium, magnesium, sodium, lithium, carbon, nitrogen, fluorine. I could go on and on. All these, the greatest hits, the atoms that you know about are high up on the periodic table. You know about K potassium, or you should. You know about Cl chlorine. And then we have this thing. What the heck is this? Fr. It's francium, but I bet you've never heard of Fr. So this is my point. This is the hack. If you've never heard of an element, it is probably down here. Down in the sewer. Down in the dungeon. You've never heard of francium. I bet you've never heard of francium. It's all the way down here. Which means that if something is really low on the periodic table, it is freaking big. Okay? If you've heard of an atom, you've seen it in the TEAS, it's like, you know, an atom that shows up, it's probably at the top of the periodic table and it's probably small. If you haven't heard of an atom, Fr, francium, what the heck is that? It's probably down at the bottom of the periodic table where the atoms are freaking huge. And that is the hack for this challenge question. The atoms you've heard about are up at the top where they are small. If you haven't heard of an atom, it is likely to be at the bottom where the atoms are big. And that means that the correct answer here is francium. You see how I used kind of a hack, a trick to answer that? I didn't have to memorize the whole periodic table. I could kind of think through it. Now, maybe you're like, oh, well, you know, I could never do that on the test. Okay, maybe not, but now you know. Now you know how to do this. So if you had a similar question, you could probably think through it. You'd be like, okay, the atoms that I'm familiar with tend to be at the top. The atoms that I am not familiar with tend to be at the bottom. That could be useful information that you could use in a variety of ways. Okay, let's move on here. 8. Choose the accurate statement. Now we have these 4 statements. We'll go through them one by one when we solve the question, okay? But this is an anatomy and physiology question. It's a high priority essential topic. There are 2 main things that this question is asking, okay? It's asking about different parts of the body, and it's about how we describe them in relation to each other using anatomy terms, okay? So this is definitely a high priority topic for A&P. You got to know this. Here, let's go step by step. A, the sternal region is posterior to the dorsal region. Okay, first off, what's the sternal region? The sternal region is kind of it's where the sternum is, the sort of front chest area. The dorsal region is generally like back area, okay? Now, if something is posterior, what does that mean? It means that it is behind. So would it be correct to say that the sternal region is behind the dorsal region? No, absolutely not. Cross it off. The appendix is superior to the liver. Well, you got to know where these things are, okay? First of all, where is the liver? Liver's right here. That's where our liver is. Where's the appendix? The appendix is this tiny little part of the large intestine right there. Right there. This little sort of finger-shaped pouch that's pointing out of the large intestine. Okay. Now, superior, what does that mean? It means above. Is the appendix above the liver? No, it is below the liver. Cross it off. B is also wrong. C, the rectus abdominis is anterior to the gluteus maximus. These are muscles that we're talking about here. Here, let me use a different color. Rectus abdominis, these abdominal muscles here. Gluteus maximus, butt muscles, go right there. Anterior, what does anterior mean? In front of. Well, the rectus abdominis is in the front, gluteus maximus is in back, so this looks like it is correct. The rectus abdominis is in front of the gluteus maximus. Let's just look at D to double check and to learn something else. The femur is inferior to the fibula. These are bones that we're talking about. The femur, what is a femur? Femur is that bone right there, the leg. The fibula, what is that? It's that bone there, the thin one. That's a fibula. Inferior, what does inferior mean? It means below. The femur is inferior to the fibula, is that true? Absolutely not. The femur is above the fibula. So that means that D is also wrong. And if we go back to this, we know that our correct answer here is C. Rectus abdominis, anterior to the gluteus maximus. Really important to know these terms, stuff like posterior, superior, anterior, inferior, so you can describe the locations of things in the body relative to each other. And it's also important for you to know where the various regions are of the body. Important for you to know sort of where the major muscles are. Be familiar with the major bones in their location, also the major organs. Definitely high priority stuff for anatomy and physiology. A researcher collects data from several towns and observes that towns with a greater number of ice cream shops also report a higher number of accidental drownings during the summer months. Which of the following is the best conclusion based on this information? I'm going to read the choices here so we can start thinking through it. A, eating more ice cream causes an increase in drowning incidents. B, Opening more ice cream shops directly leads to unsafe swimming conditions. C, there's a correlation between ice cream shops and accidental drownings, but there is not necessarily causation. And D, reducing the number of ice cream shops will immediately reduce drowning rates. This question is a scientific reasoning question. It is on a high priority, essential topic. We're going to talk through it. Okay. This question is getting at something that the TEAS absolutely loves, which is correlation versus causation. Let's talk about what that means. Okay. There are lots of ways that different things in the world can be related to each other. Two things can go or move together. That's correlation. In this example, they say that towns with a greater number of ice cream shops also report a higher number of drownings, okay? So ice cream shops and drownings go together. The number of one goes up, the number of the other goes up. That's correlation. They go together. Correlation. But the second part, that's where we're talking about causation. Does one cause the other? Okay? Correlation. As we said, two things go together. Number of ice cream shops goes up, number of drownings goes up. Correlation. Causation. Do ice cream shops cause drownings? Just because one thing goes up and another thing goes up does not mean that one thing is causing the other. And that's what correlation versus causation is all about. Are the ice cream shops making people drown? Heck no! These two things are related. More ice cream shops, more drownings, yes. But the ice cream shops are not frickin' causing the drownings, right? There are many reasons why these two things could be correlated. Why? Well, let's think about this. Maybe bigger towns have more ice cream shops. Well, if the town is bigger, there are going to be more people who drown. Okay? Another reason. Maybe there are more ice cream shops in towns that have a lot of beach. And if you have a lot of beach, there's more drowning. Stuff like that, right? There are many reasons why the number of ice cream shops and the number of drownings can both increase. But the ice cream shops are not causing the drownings. So the main point of this is that, yes, ice cream shops and drownings are correlated. The numbers of both go up, but there's no causation here. The ice cream is not causing the drowning. Now that we've covered that correlation versus causation, keep in mind that the TEAS loves it. They're always going to give you examples like this where you need to think, is one thing, do these two things just go together, or is one actually causing the other? Now let's go through the choices. Now that we've talked about correlation, causation. Okay. A, eating more ice cream causes an increase in drowning incidents. No. That would be true if there was causation. If the ice cream shops caused drowning, yes, A would be true, but it's not. It's correlated, but it's not causation. B, opening more ice cream shops directly leads to unsafe swimming conditions. Again, no. The ice cream shops do not cause drowning. The number of both goes up, but the ice cream shops are not causing drowning. Get rid of it. C, there is a correlation between ice cream shops and accidental drownings, but there is not necessarily causation. Ooh, I like this one. This looks good, but let's just check D. Reducing the number of ice cream shops will immediately reduce drowning rates. Heck no. Yes, it would if the ice cream shops were making people drown, but they're not. So you can get rid of all the ice cream shops, people are still going to drown because it is not causative. One is not causing the other. Okay, so that means that our best choice here is C. There is a correlation. They go together. The numbers rise together, but there's a correlation between ice cream shops and accidental drownings, but there is not necessarily causation. Boom. That is how to deal with a correlation causation question for the TEAS. Question 10, water reabsorption in the descending loop of Henle is most accurately described as A, active transport along a concentration gradient, B, active transport against a concentration gradient, C, osmosis along a concentration gradient, or D, osmosis against a concentration gradient. Ooh, this is a high priority essential topic. We're talking about anatomy and physiology here, and we're talking about a number of things that are high priority. We're talking about stuff like active transport, osmosis. We're also talking about kidney function. The loop of Henle is in the kidney, and this is fundamentally about how does a kidney work. Okay, super important you know this, so we're going to do a little bit of review. Here we have a little picture of a kidney right here. What's the job of the kidney? The job of the kidney is to filter waste from the blood. The kidney also plays a role in sort of regulating fluid balance, making sure that you have the right amount of water in your blood. Okay, and if we zoomed in to the kidney, we'd see a nephron, and the nephron is like the sort of little individual units that the kidney is made out of. Okay. So basically, how does this organ work, right? How does this organ take out the waste, get the balance of water right? It can't take out too much water, or we'd pee out all of our water in our body and we die, right? So how does it get the balance right? Well, here's basically what happens. We have blood entering the nephron here. It goes in this area called the glomerulus, and at this point, a lot of water and waste leaves the blood. And now that water and waste sort of moves through the tubule. We call this tubule, like this, blah, 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 blah. But if we just peed out everything that's in the tubule, like all the water from our body would just like be urinated out. So that doesn't work. A lot of the water that came out of the blood with the waste in the glomerulus, it's got to get back into the blood. And that's what happens here. In this area, loop of Henle, water moves from the tubule back into the blood. How does it do it? That's what we're going to focus on. How does the water get back into the blood? Okay, let's look here, focus on this area a little bit more. There are two important things for us to keep in mind. One, what is the amount of water in different areas, and what is the amount of dissolved stuff? We call that solute, the dissolved stuff. Okay? How much water is there in various places? How much dissolved stuff is there? Okay? And it is the balance between water and dissolved stuff that actually is going to pull water back into the blood. Let's take a look. Okay, here in the tubule, I've done a little picture of the solute, which is the dissolved stuff, compared to the water. Now remember we said, in the tubule, we have lots and lots of water because it got squeezed out of the blood. Lots and lots of water. And you can see that in my picture here, right? There is lots of water, high amount of water. High water, do high H2O. And there's not a whole lot of dissolved stuff in there. Now you can say, yeah, there's waste, there's urea, there's stuff like that. But generally you can see these solutes right there. I'll do a different color. The solute, the dissolved stuff, there's not a whole lot. Okay? There's a lot of water because water left the blood and it entered the tubule. Now, over here, let's take a look at what the blood looks like. Well, the blood lost a lot of its water. So there is low water. It ended up in the tubule. And on the other hand, there's a lot of dissolved stuff in the blood. There are proteins that can't come out. There are ions. Some of that stuff can't come out. There's all sorts of stuff that's dissolved in the blood. So we have a really high concentration of solutes. So in the tubule, we have high concentration of water. In the blood, we have a low concentration of water. And now the tubule and blood kind of snake around each other. And they both have surfaces that water can move through. Water can move into the blood vessels. It can move out of the tubule. And when we have a situation like this, where water can move, and we have high water concentration in the tubule and low water concentration in the blood, that water wants to even out. And the water is going to move from high concentration in the tubule to low concentration in the blood. And that is an example of osmosis. 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 Water moves from a high concentration in the tubule to a low concentration in the blood. And that is how the water gets back into the blood. It moves from high concentration to low concentration. Let's look back at our answer choices. Now, we said this was osmosis, but real quick, A and B, active transport. What's active transport? Active transport is that the body needs to use energy. The cells need to use energy to pump something across a barrier. No. The water reabsorption, the water going back into the blood that happens in the kidney, it happens by itself. You don't have to use any energy for it. So we can get rid of active transport. No. It is an example of osmosis. And as we said, the osmosis that is happening is because there is high H2O in the tubule moving to low H2O in the blood. That happens automatically. It's osmosis. And we call that osmosis along a concentration gradient. When you go from high to low, you are going along a gradient. If we were trying to go from low to high, that would be against the gradient. If we were trying to take the low amount of water in the blood and push it into the tubule where there is already a high amount of water, then we're going against the gradient. You have to put energy in to go against the gradient. But going along the gradient, going from high to low, that naturally happens, naturally goes from high to low. Osmosis along a concentration gradient naturally moves from high to low. Okay, so that's the end of our 10 free mini lessons. I really hope they were helpful. I hope that you like the way I teach. I hope that the way I teach helps you learn. Okay, so if you like how I teach, if it helps you learn, you can get the explanations and mini lessons for the rest of the test. That's 40 more mini lessons to go over the topics, the whole rest of the test. You can get that on my website, teasinOneDay.com. If you have any questions that I can help with, send me an email, tyler@teasinOneDay.com. And as always, I hope you crush the teas.